The Return of Sherlock Holmes, 1905, Episode 13, The Adventure of the Second Stain. Welcome back, fellow detectives. After witnessing Holmes's moral struggle at Abbey Grange, you might think we've reached the peak of complexity in his cases. But today's final episode brings us a mystery that operates on two levels simultaneously. A matter of international diplomacy that could plunge Europe into war, and a domestic tragedy that threatens to destroy an innocent woman's life. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if a single missing document could trigger a continental war? What if the fate of nations rested on Sherlock Holmes's ability to recover a stolen letter? Prepare yourself for what Watson called the most important international case Holmes ever handled, a mystery where political intrigue and personal desperation collide with explosive consequences. Picture yourself at Baker Street on an autumn morning in 1886. You're reading the morning papers with Holmes when an unexpected visitor is announced. The Prime Minister of Great Britain himself, accompanied by the Secretary of State for European Affairs. When the government itself needs help, they turn to Sherlock Holmes. "Mr. Holmes," the Prime Minister begins, "we face a crisis of the utmost gravity. A confidential document has been stolen that could trigger a European war within weeks." The Secretary of State, Lord Bellinger, explains. 3 days ago, I received a letter from a foreign potentate containing frank opinions about another nation's ruler. If revealed, war would be virtually inevitable. I kept it locked in my dispatch box at home. The next morning it was gone. "Was there any sign of forced entry?" Holmes asks. Lord Bellinger shakes his head. "None. The study window was closed and locked from inside. The door was locked and I keep the only key on my person at all times. Yet somehow, someone entered my study, opened my dispatch box, and removed that single letter, leaving everything else untouched." Think carefully about this scenario, detective. A locked room, a locked box, and a theft so precise that only one specific document was taken. This suggests someone who knew exactly what they were looking for and had a compelling reason to take that particular letter. Who knew about the letter's existence? Holmes probes. The Prime Minister responds, "Only a handful of people in the government, myself, Lord Bellinger, and 2 or 3 trusted advisors. Certainly no one outside the highest levels of government should have known about it." "Yet someone did know," Holmes observes. "Someone knew the letter existed, knew where it was kept, and knew how valuable it was. That suggests either a government leak or an extremely well-informed foreign intelligence operation." The two statesmen exchange troubled glances, clearly having already considered this disturbing possibility. Holmes asks to examine Lord Bellinger's house. In the study, he finds distinctive reddish clay on the carpet and scratches on the window frame. When interviewing the household, he notices Lady Hilda Bellinger is unusually nervous and won't meet his eyes. "Lady Hilda," Holmes asks gently, "did you enter your husband's study on the night the letter was stolen?" She pales. "No, of course not. I never enter without permission." But her trembling hands tell a different story. After leaving the Bellinger residence, Holmes declares, "I need to check something at Scotland Yard. This case has elements that remind me of another investigation." At the Yard, he consults records of recent unsolved murders and finds what he's looking for. 3 days ago, the same night the letter was stolen, a man named Eduardo Lucas was found murdered in his home in Godolphin Street. Lucas was killed by a single stab wound to the heart, Holmes reads from the police report. No apparent motive for the murder, nothing stolen from the house. He was a well-known society figure, wealthy, with connections to several European embassies. The case remains unsolved. Watson looks puzzled. "You think this murder is connected to the stolen letter?" Holmes's eyes gleam with certainty. "I'm certain of it. Eduardo Lucas was a spy, Watson, one of those charming society men who move in diplomatic circles collecting secrets. If anyone could have learned about the letter and arranged its theft, it would be someone like him. But he was murdered the same night, you point out. If he stole the letter, who killed him, and where is the letter now?" Holmes smiles grimly. "Those are precisely the questions we need to answer, and I believe the key lies in that distinctive mud I found in Lord Bellinger's study." Holmes visits Eduardo Lucas's house with Inspector Lestrade. Examining the murder scene, he makes a crucial discovery. "Watson, look at this. There's a blood stain hidden under the carpet. Someone cut out that section and repositioned it to cover an older stain." "Two bloodstains?" Watson asks. "But Lucas was only killed once." Holmes's face shows excitement. "Exactly, which means there were two separate violent incidents in this room. Someone went to considerable effort to hide evidence of an earlier struggle." Holmes presents his theory to Watson. "Lady Hilda had an affair with Eduardo Lucas years ago. Lucas, being a spy and blackmailer, kept her letters as leverage. When she saw the diplomatic letter in her husband's study, she stole it to exchange for her own compromising correspondence. But Lucas refused the trade. The diplomatic letter was worth far more. They struggled, and Lucas was wounded, hence the first bloodstain. Lady Hilda fled with both sets of letters. Lucas cleaned up the evidence, but then a foreign agent came seeking the diplomatic letter and killed him." Holmes returns to confront Lady Hilda, and she breaks down completely. "Eduardo Lucas and I were close years ago. He kept my letters, threatening to expose me unless I provided government secrets. When I saw that diplomatic letter, I thought I could finally buy my freedom. But he refused the trade. He could sell the diplomatic letter for thousands. We argued. He grabbed me. I pushed him. He fell and struck his head. I grabbed both sets of letters and ran. I've been too terrified to return it or destroy it." Holmes takes the recovered letter. "Lady Hilda, I will return this to the government and say I found it in Lucas's house. Your name will never be mentioned. But you must never again allow yourself to be vulnerable to blackmail. You've been given a second chance. Use it wisely." Holmes returns the letter to the Prime Minister and Lord Bellinger with a carefully constructed story. "I traced the letter to Eduardo Lucas, who was indeed a foreign spy. He stole it intending to sell it to hostile powers, but before he could complete the transaction he was murdered by a rival agent. I recovered the letter from a hidden compartment in his house. The statesmen are overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. The diplomatic crisis is averted, the letter is destroyed, and European peace is preserved. Eduardo Lucas is posthumously branded as a traitor and spy, which damages no one since he's already dead, and Lady Hilda Bellinger is saved from exposure and disgrace. Inspector Lestrade closes the Lucas murder case as an assassination by foreign agents, which is partially true. Someone did kill Lucas, though Holmes suspects it was a rival spy seeking the diplomatic letter. The true complexity of the case, Lady Hilda's involvement, the blackmail, the theft, remains known only to Holmes, Watson, and Lady Hilda herself. Back at Baker Street, Watson reflects on the case. "Holmes, you've now lied to protect criminals in two consecutive cases. First Captain Croker at Abbey Grange and now Lady Hilda. Doesn't this trouble you?" Holmes sits in silence for a long moment before responding. "It troubles me profoundly," he finally admits. "I've become something I never intended to be, a man who decides which laws deserve enforcement and which crimes deserve forgiveness. But what alternative do I have, Watson? Should I have exposed Lady Hilda, destroyed her marriage, ruined her husband's career, all to punish her for a theft motivated by blackmail?" "Eduardo Lucas was the real villain," Holmes continues. "He was a blackmailer, a spy, and a man who preyed on vulnerable people. Lady Hilda was his victim, driven to desperate action by his threats. Yes, she stole an important document, and yes, that was wrong. But she was prepared to return it, and she's been tormented by guilt ever since." Watson pours them both whiskey. "I understand your reasoning, Holmes. But where does it end? If you keep making exceptions for sympathetic criminals, don't you eventually undermine the entire justice system?" Holmes nods heavily. "That's exactly what terrifies me. Each exception seems justified in isolation, but collectively, they represent a detective who's placed himself above the law. Perhaps," Holmes says slowly, "that's why Watson waited so long to publish these cases. They show me not at my most brilliant, but at my most conflicted, a man struggling with the difference between legal justice and moral justice, and not always certain he's chosen correctly. So tell me, detective, did you guess that Lady Hilda was involved in the theft before Holmes revealed it? Do you believe Holmes was right to protect her, or should he have reported the full truth to the authorities? And what does this case teach us about the corrupting influence of blackmail and the desperate measures people take to escape their past mistakes?" This complex finale reminds us that international intrigue and domestic tragedy often intertwine in unexpected ways. What seemed like a pure espionage case was actually driven by personal desperation and old indiscretions. The letter that could have started a war was stolen not by sophisticated spies, but by a frightened woman trying to escape blackmail. It also brings Holmes's moral journey full circle. From his resurrection at the empty house, through cases involving murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy, to these final cases where he repeatedly chooses mercy over legal strictness. The great detective has evolved from a pure logician into a man who understands that justice sometimes requires compassion, and that the law, for all its importance, doesn't always serve what's truly right. This concludes our complete journey through The Return of Sherlock Holmes. 13 cases that showcase not only Holmes's brilliant deductive powers, but also his growing understanding of human complexity and moral ambiguity. From solving locked-room mysteries to protecting desperate people from unjust consequences, we've seen Holmes at his most human, his most conflicted, and ultimately, his most compassionate. Thank you for joining me through all 13 episodes of this remarkable series. The game, as always, remains afoot, and true justice, as Holmes has shown us, sometimes requires the courage to look beyond the law to find what's genuinely right. Until our next adventure, remember, the greatest mysteries aren't always about finding the truth, but about deciding what to do with it once you've found it.